All righty. Hi, everybody. Thank you for making it to the 2023 Torrance Festival of Ideas. This is our session with Jordan Argret. Have I said that right, Jordan?
Yes.
Excellent. Who is the program director of the Athens Science Cafe, which we hope to learn a lot about. I'm the festival director and the director of the Torrance Center, and I will be leading this interview together with Katie Ireland, who will introduce herself.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Anna. So my name is Katie Ireland. I'm the interim director of the Digital Humanities Lab, fondly known as the DigiLab, here at the UGA Libraries. And we are an interdisciplinary lab group. We focus on DH, digital tools and research and support, but we also work with people across campus, faculty, grads, and undergrads. So glad to be here.
Yeah, so Katie gets to see the whole remit of everybody across UGA, which is kind of a unique position, I think, for anyone in a faculty staff role. So that's pretty cool. Jordan, so you are the person of the moment here, and we are very excited to ask you all of our many questions, and we'll try to squeeze as many as we can in this 1 hour session, right? So first, we'd just like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, and specifically with regard perhaps to what drew you to science. Yeah, let's start there.
All right. Yeah, so Jordan, I grew up, let's see, how far back do I want to go?
As far as you need to.
Yeah. Science for me was something that I think I formally, or I'd say research, is something I kind of formally came into later in my career. So around the end of college really is when it started developing, but I've always been interested in the natural world. I was in my gardening club. I would always, play with the bugs. I would always get those canisters of ladybugs or praying mantis that you put in the garden.
Right.
I would always hold them on for too long and watch them and do stuff. So it was always something that was there, but it never really became a formal pursuit of interest for me, mainly because I was thinking about other stuff like music or whatnot. So I, grew up on the West Coast, moved to the East Coast in high school, put me in a lot of different ecosystems with different areas, with both people, environmentally, and everything. And it kind of made me become very observant of my environment. And then I came down south for college, and that was where I started to really try to take some of the things that I observed and try to formalize it, for lack of a better term. At the time, it was more just me walking in the woods and just thinking of things, but it slowly developed into this interest of kind of trying to ask questions and then trying to answer them with the best of my ability. So, and that was always what was exciting, that I could kind of just sit in a room and think about something and then figure out how to answer it and get paid to do so.
Yeah, that's cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Can you think of your earliest example of that? Or maybe an early example?
Of kind of the questioning, I guess?
Yes.
I'm trying to think of one that's not so I think if we think really basic level, when I was a little kid, I would always follow the trails of ants all around the house in California. We always had ant problems, and I'd always follow where they're going and try to figure out if I could see where they're coming from. And then it wasn't necessarily like a structured study and then see what the reality was, but it was always go around the house. Oh, look, the trail goes over here, it goes out the front. These ants are from somewhere else. These ants are from the pool area. My dad and I, we always had these mourning doves that would, I forgot what the term is for birds when they nest. I'm a plant person, so it's not a plant I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
I would always try to think, oh, what time of year are they coming? Oh, is it time for them to come around? Just kind of more on the, like I said, the natural history side of science, is kind of observing, was really what I did early. And then it wasn't until college where I started having more formal, I did a class project on looking at invasive species, Japanese catflower, and it's how it existed in our nature reserve, how close to the trail would we see it, and how thick was it growing in those areas, and did that extend into the woods? And that's kind of where I think it became more of a formalized practice when I had more rigor around it. But
yeah,
I was a little kid.
That is cool. And I don't agree that you're only an animal person, because now you're heading your program directing the whole Athens Science
Yeah.
Fair, which means you're interested in this, in lots of different things. So tell us a little bit about the Athens Science Cafe in terms of what, its history, what it's doing now, and your role in it.
Yeah. So I will say that in terms of the history of Athens Science Cafe, it's a little bit harder for me as a graduate student that was really only plugged in a year ago, and there's always that turnover between groups. So I know as much as I know is it starting about 10 years ago, and I know that the concept was not necessarily, or is not necessarily invented in our environment, but it was something that felt like it's something easy to replicate now. And it really from the beginning was, from my perspective, a very successful idea. It's a really simple idea, and it's something that kind of runs itself. So I think it's a really great program for graduate students to kind of be in control of. So I came into Athens Science Cafe about 2 years ago, but more so a year in terms of my current role. I really went to a couple talks. I didn't go to many during the pandemic, even though I was working here. I don't think that there really were any that I can think of. But well, hopefully not actually. But once I went to the first event, and I think it was Jason Wallace, who's actually our faculty liaison, was talking about microbes, and I was just sitting there in the back, being like, okay, this is one. It's really cool to see professors and graduate students being able to come to venues around Athens and talk about their science, and it's fun for me to get out of the science house, so to speak, right, and really be able to talk about these things in areas where you would maybe expect people not to be interested, but where they really are engaged. So Athens Science Cafe, to give a background, is essentially that. If we take freshmen and graduate students, and we bring them to different environments, whether it be a local coffee shop like Bay, a bar like Little Kings, or we're trying to expand to breweries and other venues to really bring what happens within the walls of the university outside. Really trying to engage with the Athens community first, because in my opinion, if the Athens community doesn't know what we're doing, then we're not serving them. Because if I don't care if the rest of the world knows if Athens doesn't know, because that's right next to right outside. We could yell to them. We are part of the community. So I really felt that it's a really important mission of this organization. So I was like, of course I'll try to jump along and help out in any way I can.
That's very cool. Yeah.
Very cool.
In relation to that, if I can just jump in 1 second to say, yeah, I mean, bring up an interesting point of public communication, like science communication. And what do you see are the impediments of science communication, really? Like, what your experiences now? Like, is it that scientists don't know how to speak simply about their work? Is it the lack of interest in the community? Is it, or just what are the gaps there? Or are there any? Am I just assuming there are gaps?
So there are definitely gaps. I will try my best to think what I've seen so far. I feel like I've only been what I would consider, when I start considering myself a scientist, for maybe like 3 years. So it's hard for me to speak wholly on that. But the big things for me, I think, are one, we don't really get formally trained on how to communicate our research. So it is, in my opinion, often asking a lot of a researcher to be very skilled in doing so, while also being skilled in being a scientist, or being I kind of consider it part of being a scientist, but to be skilled in both the research and the communication of the research, and a lot of other areas that may be separate jobs, right, within a company, for example. So it's something that I think kind of requires its own arm to really be as successful as it could be, but that doesn't mean that scientists should not be engaged, right? So because I create my own question, because I try to find my own funding for it, it also falls on me to communicate it both within the community and outside of the community. So for myself, I have tried to kind of incorporate science communication training and practice so that when I get to that stage of presenting my research, I have that ability. And I would encourage other scientists to do so, but the reality is, depending on your field, the timeline for your research, it's sometimes very demanding to ask someone to simply wear 2 different hats at the same time. I feel very similarly about I feel very similarly about science communication as I do, for example, say mentorship or teaching skills, where there's something that you're essentially trying to learn 2 jobs at the same time. And we really just need to, as a community, place more power in people training in science communication or teaching or mentorship, as much as we do value the research output that they have, especially early in the career. So it's one of those things that how do like the steps to solve that. I feel like it's really difficult because I think the experience is always very individual, especially in graduate school, because you're directly working for one individual and not necessarily for a larger collective, or you could be, but the structure is very different university to university. But I do think that incorporating trainings on how to communicate your research, how to communicate it to different levels, and how to kind of remove some of the jargon from your research would be highly beneficial and kind of solve some of these early problems for science communication. That would be my ideas about it.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit more about ways that people, members of the community, students, and faculty can get involved in the Athens Science Cafe?
Yes. So Athens Science, so I'm the director of Athens Science Cafe, but it's really run by a leadership team where we wear specific hats on our website, but we all kind of contribute in different parts of the project. So I think I should give a little bit about the structure of the Science Cafe because it would help to see how people can kind of slot in. So speakers are nominated through the community. So for the past couple cafes, it may have been nominated by myself or someone else just because sometimes the turnover between a month to the next month, it's hard to find someone to find a speaker and then bring them in. So we kind of have a list to pull from if we don't have someone to nominate. But often it's nominated by just a member of the Athens Science Cafe. And that predominantly right now it's graduate students, could easily be expanded. I think that more so is due to our network than anything else. So that would be an exciting area where people can kind of join by joining our listserv and communicating through our emails to send us ideas. Oh, I heard this person talk over here, and they're in Georgia or they're in Athens, and you should think about bringing them over. So that's an easy way for them to slot in, is just by helping us to find speakers, because we really do that through the community, and predominantly right now graduate students. In terms of engaging, it's really, the big thing is obviously coming to the cafe, right? So the cafes are monthly on normally Thursdays or Fridays, the third week or fourth week, depending on when we can get the speaker. And attending those events is really, I guess, the easiest way to engage with Athens Science Cafe. Because one, you get to engage with the speaker, but also most of the leadership and members are at this event. And they also, so one of the big things that I like about them is they often serve as great networking spaces because you have a lot of different researchers in one place. So both for kind of communication networking, but also for professional networking. So that would be another thing, is to come to the events, and then through that, obviously doing the same thing you might do by the email or whatever, by talking to myself or talking to one of our other leadership members, and figuring out how we can slot in. But because the organization is kind of loose in its form, there's not necessarily any like specific direction I push people towards. It's more about what they're interested in, and then we figure out how we can incorporate that into making it. I feel like I didn't fully answer that, but I'm going to stop there for now.
That's great. So what has been your favorite talk so far? Are you allowed to say that, or?
So I'm going to give a few just because to make sure a couple of the people I work with. So, so I think my favorite, or the talk that I'll give the talk I was most excited for. I think I'll give another talk that was the most exciting for me while I was there. And then my final talk, which is one that I really was like near and dear to my heart. So it was awesome to see that. So the first talk, which is the one I was most excited for, I actually didn't get to go. So it was Taka in the ecology department. He studies ant communication and intelligence, collective intelligence, which to me is just like such a cool research topic to think about, like how ants will I think I'm gonna ruin the example. Hopefully he doesn't see me talk about this, but think about how ants will train other ants to follow specific paths, get to whatever food source or whatnot, and how that process works, how long it takes, what is going on in between that. So that talk I was so excited for it, and it was also the first talk that I was hosting. And then I unfortunately had to go to a funeral, so I had to miss it. So that was probably my most excited. In terms of, what was my second? Okay, the talk that really surprised me or was really engaging for me when I was there as really a member of the cafe rather than even running it is that Dr. Jerry Shannon talked about essentially how maps lie. So looking at how we can structure maps to kind of tell different stories, right? Like think about classically gerrymandering or just like even how the visuals reflect the data and information that people may want to see or direct them to what they may want to look at. And that was, for me, it's something that I thought about before when I was in environmental science and in undergrad, because we spent a good bit talking about kind of urbanization and its effects. And in that, you kind of mix in more environmental justice topics, and then mapping and other things get mixed in there. So I was familiar with a lot of the concepts, but it was really awesome to see the work he was doing, because it was very much based in Athens and mapping Athens related issues. And it was really close to home. And we had great attendance at that talk. We've had great attendance at all of our talks, but that one was a very engaged conversation. People were asking questions in the middle of it. It became much less like a structured like lecture, or they're never really lectures, but TED Talk, let's say, and much more like just a conversation with them, which is the ideal.
Mhm.
So that was actually, I'm gonna stop with those two. I'm gonna give a shout out to Will Rogers, who gave a talk about this photo documentation that I actually was doing this morning. And that was another one of the ones where it kind of got the community engaged, because there was something that they could do after the talk. So those are probably my top three, but I like them all. That's why so we picked them all.
That's very cool. What is the next upcoming talk?
So that one is at the end of April, and I will keep you posted on that, as we're still in the work of trying to lock down the venue and the location, but it will be Frank Mack he's a graduate student, a PhD candidate. He's going to be talking about robotics and waves. So I'm excited for that one. We like to keep, as you probably can gather, our titles of our talks and the potential subject material very open-ended and also very simple, because it allows for the speaker to talk about what they want, but also it's not like, sometimes I feel like scientific titles are very intimidating. So if someone saw like a really long form title about some very neat topic, and then they get there and you're already having a beer, you're already having trouble focusing, people are saying. But anyway, so Wayne and robots is really the next talk, and I'll keep everyone posted on the venue for that. End of April.
I'll try and find your website to pull up and show it. But
Yeah.
in the meantime, Katie, can you keep pushing with the
Yeah.
questions?
Totally. So will you tell us actually about your own scientific research now?
Yes. Hopefully one day before I graduate, I'll give a talk on it, but have no data yet, so it's nothing really going on. So my research focuses on parasitic plants. So people often, I guess the best example is mistletoe, for example. They essentially plants that attach to another plant, like through this organ called a haustoria or haustorium, and then they extract nutrients through like this gradient of just essentially sucking water like a vacuum out of the host plant, is what we call it, to the parasite. So for me, they're incredibly exciting, because everyone thinks about charismatic plant groups. You think of the orchids, you think of carnivorous plants, and they get a lot of press, and rightfully so. But I kind of stumbled into this world of parasitic plants and was like, well, how come no one really thinks about this? Half of the botanists I talked to, I'll be like, oh, that plant's parasitic. And they're like, oh, I think I read that one time, or, oh, that's interesting. And they've been shown in a lot of the literature to actually be really influential. So we think about keystone species, like often the great examples like Yellowstone wolves, right? Where their effects on the community have cascading effects on everything else around them. Like, so if you remove the wolves, then there's too many elk, and the elk eat all the plants, and then now you've ruined the whole ecosystem. It's the same idea, or we're seeing some of the same effects with parasitic plants. So they kind of, I like, my whole argumentation is this Robin Hood effect. It's like they're stealing from the dominant plants and giving those nutrients to the surrounding plant community. So I have to aim to prove that and show that we see that in nature. So TBD if what I think is correct, but that's kind of where I'm at right now with my research, and I think it's super awesome, but it's also one that sometimes is hard to articulate, because they're really complicated in their interactions with others. So once people ask follow-up questions, I'm always like, oh.
I think you articulated it incredibly well with that metaphor,
Yes.
I have to say.
Okay,
I mean,
good, okay.
talk about good science communication, right? I'm gonna just share the page very quickly for anyone interested in the Athens Science Cafe. Is this the current one, Jordan?
Yes, this is the most up to date right now.
I feel
Yeah,
terrible
this
that
is
I
better.
missed this talk. Can I
Yeah.
just say, I just, this would have been such fun.
Absolutely.
The last one was The Trouble with Poop by Andrew Huang. That's brilliant. And you can look up anything you want, I think, about the Athens Science Cafe. I also like the logo very much. Whoever came with that is very cool. The team over here, Jordan spoke about some of the team before, and ways to get involved as well.
Yeah.
So if somebody wanted to, people could volunteer themselves if they wanted to, right?
Yes.
To speak.
So we actually, the nice thing about, at least within the graduate student population, the nice thing about Athens Science Cafe is that graduate students are always coming in and out. So there's always potential, like more official positions for people that want to be involved. Also, I will say that part of my goals for the future of the Science Cafe, you can see my fist every time. A lot of the goals for my future with ASD is to kind of revamp some of this. So we are going to be redesigning our logo. That's in the works right now. We're going to try to revamp the website and increase our social media presence as kind of our whole marketing push that we have. So the page that will for sure look the same is the contact. Everything else may look up to date and a little bit more modernized in the near future. But you can see a lot of even the older events that we've had, kind of the Athens Science Cafe history. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Very cool. And does it meet also during the summer?
So historically, it's taken a hiatus during the summer just because a lot of us will have research elsewhere or want to go home or whatnot. This year, we are trying to see if we can lock down speakers for the summer, and then if so, we probably will do at least one summer event, and maybe do it like we've always flirted with the idea of doing an outdoor venue at like a park at night with a screen or something, and making it more accessible for families. So I won't promise anything, but the goal is at least this year, and if not this year, the next year, that we will also have some summer events, maybe even 2 events per month, one being more social focused and one being obviously around the cafe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something like a
wait.
science fest or a science fair would be so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Outdoor springtime or in fall would be great. Yeah. We're just throwing ideas there to put more pressure.
Yeah, no, these are all
Yes.
good.
Because we want to come. We can't wait to come.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'm just curious more about how you arrived at parasitic plants. You said that other folks hadn't studied this as much. Were there other things you were thinking out before that have been more studied with plants?
I kind of pride myself. So there's not that there's certain types of researchers, but I'm just going to give myself a type for the sake of explaining this. But I'm definitely an ideas person, so I'm always thinking of things to ask, questions to ask, and following up on very few of them. So when I began my PhD, I gave my potential advisors like 10 or so questions of stuff that I run into through my time as a technician after graduate school. So it's often common after undergraduate, it's often common for ecologists to work in different environments for different, like maybe a professor that's saying, I'm hiring someone to help me count the plants in this spot. And I was just trying to do that to get research experience, because I had some of the theoretical experience in college, but I didn't really have any. I needed to know if I liked being outside and working with plants. So during those trips, I saw a lot of different things that were engaging to me. And one of them was I was working with a parasitic plant in South Georgia, and it was federally endangered. And I was kind of trying, like, there was a lot of questions we had. They're like, why is it here? Like, very simple questions. And I love simple questions. Why is it here? Why does it come up at this time of year? Why is it not over there? And for me, when I see those like low-hanging fruit style questions remaining in an area of research where people have gone all the, to the molecular level or all the way up to the ecosystem level, that's where I say this is something that I can slot into, and I can answer these questions, and it'd be a benefit to the community, and also makes it a lot easier. So it's for me, it was like, okay, low hanging fruit, plus it's something that's fairly charismatic. And also, when I Googled the amount of papers, there's like 5 or 10 papers really covering the types of topics that I'm interested in. So I really could ask whatever I wanted. And it was almost like I actually gave, brief aside, I gave like a small presentation to, I think it was a 3rd grade class. about what are parasitic plants? And then one of the students actually asked me a question about like how like isn't it like important to know the host plant and all this other stuff? And I was like, that's actually my first chapter. Like, so like, I was like, you didn't even know about this, and you've already got the same question that I have. So part of me was like, oh, like wait a minute. But the other part was like, well, I love when the questions I'm asking is easy because that means when I can communicate to they're pretty, it's easy to try to say a reason why I need to get funding or their funding for it. Also, it just makes my life easy. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I think you're selling yourself short there, because being the first in your field means you have to carve out a lot of the territory, and then you have to make always a case for what you're doing is relevant, important, noteworthy, worth funding. So there's an uphill battle there that is a battle, right? Like it's not just low hanging fruit. It's actually like, well, I'm going to make this field. I'm going to be the one. And so you're venturing into spaces that people haven't dared to go into before. So
well, yeah, no, I definitely, yeah, so this is how I thought before I started. Now that I'm in, there is very challenging to figure out, there's a reason why people didn't study this. So I have a different view on that now. When I started, I was like, oh, I just look at the plan, write the characteristics, and I'll be done with that. There we go, nature paper or something. But it's once I've gotten into the weeds of it, it's definitely, and it has its own set of challenges that are really exciting for me. So I still very much enjoy that. In fact, it's kind of like for me a high risk, high reward because I am working outside of the area of my advisors. So I kind of came into my program being an expert on something that I wasn't an expert on yet within my community. So it's been very difficult and enjoyable at the same time.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the other things you're passionate about, because by what you say, it doesn't quite show us that you actually have so many other passions that we were reading about in little blurbs on the Athens Science Cafe. So film photography and instrumental hip hop, and perhaps more. Tell us about that. And also, we were really curious about what role your artistically inclined sort of outlets have on your scientific thinking and the person you are, or vice versa.
Yeah, so I think that it's relatively common, at least now that I've gone to these spaces, that a lot of scientists will also have musical or artistic hobbies. I think that they really go hand in hand. I think that they're both creative experiences. So when you can do one, you can do the other. It's just a matter of learning different tools to get to those stages. So I really find that I get most of my like less formal thinking done doing these other activities. So my most recent one is pottery. I've gotten deep dive into doing ceramics, and I've been doing it for maybe about 4 or 5 months now. Go to the studio like 2 hours a day. Don't tell my advisors, and then I really like. I've really gone all the way into that, but I've recognized that having the time where you're focused on something else kind of allows me to separate from my research, because since it's such a thinking activity, it's hard to separate yourself from it. And often you find you actually don't make much progress when you're thinking about parasitic plants 24/7. But when you separate from that, do something else entirely, an idea pops in my head immediately after as I'm walking home. So I really think that they kind of play off of one another, and vice versa from a music. I'll be thinking about parasitic plants, like, oh, I'm tired of it. And then I can go make some music and make much better music than when I sit down and try to make something consistent. But they didn't really develop that way. So I started off wanting to be an artist. I really wanted to kind of be a producer. I spent most of my time in college, more than my parents would have wanted, making music and trying to kind of be in that community. But I realized that for me, it was very hard to sell myself musically, because I guess my creative passions artistically are a little bit more intimate to me than my scientific passions, because I feel like there's a little bit of a wall that I can have with science because I'm doing it under a structured like dogma that allows for me to like have reasons why I can defend it, where defending why my music is good or not, maybe I shouldn't really be concerned about that, but it's much more difficult to sell that aspect of myself. So I ended up kind of taking a backseat with those things and doing them just for my own personal gratification, and using science, another creative outlet, as kind of my career path. So yeah, so I a lot of like the music I really do as a way of, I kind of use it as my, if I'm making music, I'm probably a little stressed. I use my photography mostly to kind of take photos of the environments that I visit and go to. So classic like travel photographer thing. I'm not nothing special, but at least I try to, study up on it a little bit, try to improve with the hobby. And then pottery has really become my grounding exercise, almost like a meditation for me. And really taken up a daily practice because it's really helped me to separate the components of my life. So they're as important to me as my music, as my research is. And I couldn't do one without the other.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I love them. You check out my album if you want.
Oh gosh, yes.
Yes.
Do some more Googling now. Katie,
Yeah, it's all on my website.
Absolutely. So can you tell us the 3 most influential books you have read, or maybe 3 books that you're reading right now that you would recommend to us?
So I can definitely tell you the ones that I have read. It's much more difficult to read books now with all the papers that I run through. But I was trying to think about, because I never really think about what are the most influential for me until someone asked me a question like this. So I have one that I think is more personally important, which is Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. It really just as a black, at the time, a young black male, it really kind of contextualized my experience. And again, it's written from the format of a black father talking to his son. So for me, at that time period, it was very influential in really understanding how it is to be black in America and why it is the way it is. So I always recommend that book, both within and within and outside of the African American community, but especially the young black. I think it's also just a really good book. So that's probably my first one. I'm going slowly towards my science interest. So after that, I have the One Star Revolution by Masanobu Fukuoka. I probably messed up his name, but this book was really good in terms of mixing philosophy with how we should change agriculture, and how we can do more, I guess, like have agricultural practices that are more involved with how the land actually works. So thinking about the timeline of how plants move through the system and incorporating that rather than a more extractive process. And while I don't necessarily work in agriculture right now, thinking about concepts like this, how humanity should relate to the land, I think really comes across in this book. So again, it's also, both of these books are relatively short reads, so these are ones I always recommend because I think that they get a lot, they pack a big punch in a small amount of space. And this book was also written, he was a former scientist that then converted to really a full-time farmer. So, and also parasitic plants are a big issue in the agricultural world because growing something in monoculture for parasite, it infects that and destroys the field. So I do see a potential avenue for myself thinking about how they exist in natural and human affected systems. So it kind of has some overlap with some of the stuff I care about. But that was the second book. And then I think in terms of my scientific pursuits, the biggest one that really excited me and I think was accessible in the sense that it wasn't a paper or an article that is too dense. It was called The Revolutionary Genius of Plants by Stefano Mancuso. I'm always bad with names, so I apologize. But this book was essentially a bunch of shortest, I guess, stories or narratives about very unique plant adaptations that make them really exciting. So often when I talk with people about, or talk with fellow ecologists, a lot of people can be interested in plants, but some people also think about them as like, rocks, essentially. Like they know that they're relevant, they know that they're important, but they're not moving, they're not as charismatic as other things. So they often get overlooked. But this book really, it like talks about how there's a certain species of plant in the geranium genus, for example, that like will expel its seeds by shooting them off through through pressure. So someone would touch it and then they would shoot out. And those seeds through humidity gradients would essentially inchworm into a like hole in the ground where they can germinate. So it's like these plants are doing things that, and all this again, of course, requires no energy input from the plant itself. It's all using the changes of humidity and some sort of external pressure to get it to a certain point. So plants have these very unique ways of being because of the fact that they're staying in the same place for the most part, and figuring out how we can take those and use them for our own uses, but also just appreciate them. I think this book does a really great job about that. So that this is the only book that I've gotten someone else to read that's of the science genre. And my dad read it, and he would call me and be like, "Oh, like it says this." And I was like, "Dude, I told you, like crazy." And I'm like, "Also, playing." So
That's
those are
amazing.
my three, I think. And I have one I'm reading right now. You can ask about it if you want.
Yeah, tell us what you're reading right now.
Yeah, so I've only gone further into the science book realm, just because it's something that's easy to read after reading a paper, but still digestible. So Stephen Vogel is really a big name in biology and in especially also in the plant world. He has this book called The Life of a Leaf, and I'm an ecologist, so I think about the interactions between things, and as time has gone on, I've been interested in how the organism itself, for me, the parasitic plant, functions. And this book really goes into how like water transport or all these other things that really very specific plant-related functions, how they work in a way that's more explainable than a paper. So it is a little bit denser than I think the other three that I talked about, especially the revolutionary genus of plants, but it's easily accessible from my perspective in terms of science communication. So these last two are very good science communication books, in my opinion, and also again in the plant world. And then a last shout out to the Overstory, which is a really nice literary book that incorporates plant stuff. But I don't want to. Oh, here's my website. Oh no.
It's like you need to put your recommendations of
Yeah.
the page as well. It's a great page.
Yeah.
I'm only disappointed that I haven't seen any ceramic work here yet. So
Yeah, so I don't have photos of my ceramic work yet. So I like to put everything up when I have a problem with putting things together when they're fully completed, and everyone's like, well, that's too late. So I haven't put up my ceramic page, but I'm kind of trying to develop it. But yeah, my photography and some of my music.
But it is a gorgeous website, can I just say? I mean,
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. Speaking of nature books and nature reading, can you tell us about your favorite places to get outside in Athens and then maybe in Georgia or the US or
Yeah,
around
so-
the world? All of them.
Okay.
Everywhere.
Oh, thank you.
this planet, just this planet, though.
Yeah, only that's right.
I think in Athens we have a really great like hybrid outdoor space in the sense of the botanical gardens. Like I really appreciate the trail access mixed with the more like curated gardens that they have there. So that's my favorite by far. I also spend a lot of time there personally just because they have the I don't sure what they call them, the large greenhouse space. But I think botanical gardens is great. You can go from manicured to like wild in like a second. If we're going outside of Athens, that's a good question. I think most of the time when I go hiking, I end up going to North Carolina, to the Southern Appalachians. But I really enjoyed going to Okeechobee Swamp, South Georgia. I think that South Georgia is not really appreciated for its like walks or hikes. They're not really hikes because it's level ground, but the plants that you can find out there and the types of environments that you see, the more swamp and going towards the coastal plain, there's some of the most beautiful habitats. And we have like so many different habitats in Georgia. So it's cool that I can go south and go there and then go north and I'm in a more mountainous, being from the West Coast, mountainous area. And then my absolute favorite place that I've been to is also where I do my research, which is behind me, which is in Colorado, in the Rockies. And it really fulfills the idea when you think of like a field of wildflowers and all the colors and everything. You just see that there at every time. And you're mixed in with the mountains. There's something about having a huge mountain behind you that makes you feel small in a really great way. So I love it out there. I don't get to spend as much time out there as I would like, but I also am okay with that because I have cats at home and I want to see them. But that's definitely, in terms of just like awe and excitement for me, it's definitely Colorado or just a lot of the more western spots. But botanical gardens, if people haven't been in botanical gardens, that is the place to go first, and then I can give other recommendations.
That is a gorgeous space, I have to say. Gosh. Do you have any reading? So coming back to science more specifically, do you have any recommendations, like reading or viewing, if you want, recommendations that you would put forward for science students, aspiring science students, people who want to just go further into the sciences?
I think that, so my short answer is not really, but I have ways of figuring out where you should go, I guess. So it's hard for me to point to like specific resources because most of mine come from either someone telling me or like maybe I stumble in, like I'm in the library looking for one book and I see something else next to it. I'm like, oh, that also looks interesting. Let me pull that up. So one, go to the library. It's a great place to find new stuff because it's right in front of you. The other, for me, it's really about when you have a research interest or an area of interest, I would look at the type of books that I'm talking about in terms of these like science communication style books in that area, because they can often point you toward other research. So I know that when I was initially interested in ecology, I was shown like, let's see, what was the name of the book? I think Consulting the Genius of the Place, which is essentially about like this agricultural revolution and using perennial plants rather than annual plants to do something. And through that book, a lot of those science communication books will have citations for other things, right? That's part of like included in the book. So I kind of walked through that and figured out what I liked in that area and discovered it for myself. The other thing that I would say is, and this is a skill because I don't have it yet, but is really learning how to Google something that's interesting. So when I'll be outside in the woods and I'll be like, I'll take a photo of a plant and I'll use Dynactis and I get the name of the plant. And then I just Google questions about it, right? And through that, you often the first things that come up, especially if it's something that's been looked at, is either a scientific article or some other form of press about it. And those things will have resources. But I think if that really requires a more involved engagement with looking for like scientific literature and materials. So I think the biggest thing is trying to speak to people that do stuff that you find interesting. So if anyone, for example, was interested in parasitic plants, I would encourage you to talk to me, and I could probably direct you to the 3 best resources rather than doing all the time the stuff I just talked about, right? So I am very big on and it's always a scary thing, but I realize it's really easy of just cold emailing people. So when someone has something that's interesting or I either email them or try to track them down, and you'd be surprised how easily they like to talk about it. So I would say leverage the people you have. So your science teacher is talking about a topic that you think is interesting, and even if they're not the expert on that, it could be in high school, elementary school, college, whatever level, ask them about it, and they may know of something, and then they'll give that information to you, or if they don't, they'll ask somebody else because they'll be excited that you have a question. So I really think using the people around you that have those is, in my opinion, the most is the best way to make sure that you're getting right to what you want to do. So long no, but yes.
Oh, it's great suggestion. Thank you. Yeah. Katie, you want to take one last question, and then I want to try and play something from Jordan's website if he allows us.
Oh no.
Yay, great. All right, so last question. Do you have any advice or recommendations for people who are new to science and wanting to get involved, either approaching science more generally or specifically, or interested in research?
Yeah, I guess I do. So I think the biggest thing about science for me, or the thing that keeps you motivated and moving through it, is finding ways to maintain your excitement. So there's a lot of ways to do that. So the big way is, I think, whatever question interests you, follow that question and get into a practice of trying to complete it, of course, but follow what engages you. So if next week in a couple of years, I'm interested in ant-plant mutualism, or the engagements of ants and plants and how they benefit one another, I'm going to follow that path, right? I want to make sure that as long as I feel that I have enough confidence in my training, my abilities to then execute on it. So I really think that let's say we're starting in middle school and you're interested in why certain plants grow faster than others, then I think try to think of the question and write down what you think may happen. And at that point, you've already started doing science, right? Then you can just figure out how to test it, maybe with the help of an adult, or really you could probably try that one by yourself. And then if that question is you figure out what you see with that, then go to the next question, even if it's something different. I feel like often people get locked into a certain area of research or a certain thing. They'll be like, oh, I've been studying plants this whole time, so I don't think I can jump into something like studying people and their interactions, right? And maybe professionally that does get more difficult over time, but when you're just getting into science, you can move around. We have so many students that come into our lab as undergraduates that are like, I'm interested in doing genetic work with humans, but in our lab, they're working with fungi, right? And there's overlaps in terms of the techniques actually, but it doesn't, from the perspective of the student, they may not see that there's some sort of relationship there. And it may feel like, oh, if I do this, I'm stuck with fungi for the rest of my life. But that really isn't the case. So I think following whatever your passion is and figuring out how to execute on that is the big thing. And then the other thing is, and I hate this about science, or it can be about this in science, is that you have to understand that there can often be a lot of rejection or failure. So whether it's on your own end or externally. So I apply for grants like every 2 weeks, and I get like 1 or 2 grants. So and honestly, like I feel like I'm relatively successful at getting grants. So you're gonna get a lot of no's, or people are gonna say, I don't think that's interesting, or I don't want to do that. And you just have to, it's really a balance of learning how to advocate when you need to, and also knowing when maybe I can, I'm a really smart person, I can come up with a bunch of other ideas. And everyone can do that. It's really just about giving yourself the space and the time to do so. So I really think doing whatever you find the most engaging and trying to see that through and then doing it. And also understanding that others' opinions, but also there's a lot of rejection in science, and it's really just about building a resiliency to that. And then at that point, I think anyone that does those 2 things is probably going to be really. I'm still working on those 2 things. So I'll see where I go with that.
Absolutely. I was just writing down a lot of what you said because it is so important.
Yeah, and I mean, that's interesting, right? Because people don't think of the sciences being associated, they associate that with the arts, really, rejection and so on, but it's actually, if you're going to be a scientist, my gosh. Like
that was like the first thing, like when I switched, I was like, yeah, no more music, because I don't want to hear what people have to say about it, and if they don't like it. And then the first thing happened, my professor was like, well, we have to apply these grants. And I got some no's, and I was like, oh, same thing. I didn't, it's not like I can afford it.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed all of the cross connections you made between the arts and the sciences. And I think you've really spoken to the importance of interdisciplinarity, the power of it in terms of what it can do for you, both in the way that you think and feel and sort of, move through the world as a person. I want to click on one of these things. I'm sorry to embarrass you, but you can just say, no, Anna, don't do this, please.
I'm like, it's funny because all of this stuff was during my college days. So my feelings on it are different. I would say, click on the content volume 1. So these are all, well, I have to do this because I get all nervous. But
this one? Okay.
Yeah, that would be the one I would click on.
Can you hear it?
Yeah.
I like this.
I love this. This is great.
We should just have this play the entire time.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It's all sampling music, so it's a lot of like taking kind of a collage of things and putting together and then adding my own little background. Something fun.
Instrumental hip hop, that's so interesting. And what age did you start to do this? Sort of make music?
Music. So my parents put me in piano at 4 years old. So I was trained in music for a long time, but I hated it. And then I switched over to production in like high school because we happened to have like a guy who had like a little studio space near where we had the music, like music lesson, more music, like the band practice. I'm like lost on my lingo. And I kind of like just would bother him until he would let me do stuff. And then I kind of just ran with it I was doing it for maybe like, I don't know, 12 years or so. And now it's kind of taken a backseat just because, I've started doing other things, but it really was kind of the focal point for a while.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, thank you so much for taking the time with us. And as I just said, it's incredible to be able to showcase someone, a young graduate student at the beginning, not really having done so much and so many different things. and with a continued passion for not just science and not just advocacy in terms of all the things that you're interested in ants. And so I'm going to see some book by you at some point with an Ant-Man book or something. But yeah, just I'm seriously very impressed, and I think it's wonderful that someone like you is even leading the Athens Science Cafe. And you can count me and Katie in at least, and any Athenians who are watching this, that we are definitely going to be there. So thank you for all that you do, and thank you for taking the time today.
Well, thank you, Vic. And I want to give a brief little, so first of all, thank you for inviting us and myself to this event. I think that it's going to be amazing for Athens Science Cafe, reaching a different community, and also being able to share some of the story with y'all. And also, anybody that's listening to this is interested in the cafe, wants to go, we post them in flagpoles so you can see them that way. And also, if you have ideas about speakers, or we often feel like get from a certain demographic and we're trying to expand. So anybody, please email us, email me, and I'd love to chat more. But thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, thanks you, and thank you, Katie, as well, for
Absolutely.
helping me out here. Yeah, and thank you all for all the people who visited this particular session. We're sorry we couldn't do it live, but Jordan has offered to take all your questions by email.
Yes,
and you can,
I will.
if you Google him, or if you want, if you put it in the chat window, we will save all the chats and then we can send it to him as well. And for anyone who missed this, this recordings are going to be made available on the festival platform after that. It's the only thing that you will lack if you're unable to see it live is to send him questions, but just Google him with his first name, and it's one of the first hits, so you can't miss Jordan if you want to. So thank you all for being here, and enjoy the rest of the festival.